A warm good morning to one and all, and a very special good evening to Mr. Vincent Marin, who has joined us from the other side of the globe. Respected manager, Dr. Agustin Palakaparambil, a principal, Dr. Rajiv Agis Mekaran, sir, our bursar and course coordinator, around Father George Pulgalai, our resource person for the day, Mr. Vincent Marin, respected teachers, colleagues, and my dear students. Today is a very special day for us. In fact, we have been conducting many programs this year during this pandemic season, but this is a very special program in the sense that the topic that we have chosen and the person who is behind this program are too special for us. And as all of us have realized by now, the unprecedented reality of the pandemic has put human adaptability to yet another tough test. And we are trying to find ways and means to respond to the restrictive impact of COVID. There are many ways, we respond in different ways. And I would say digitalization or a digital workspace has proved to be the most effective measure in resisting this impact of the COVID. And as a world which is undergoing thorough digitalization, the skills needed for a workspace has to undergo radical changes. Certain conventional job skills which we used to cherish have become obsolete, or they have to be restructured. And the job seekers, they will have to they will have to acquire new skills. And as an academic community, we are always very eager and committed to give the best to our youngsters. And this is yet another noble venture by the internal quality organization cell of the college to equip our students to be globally competent. And as I have mentioned at the beginning, this is a very special program because the seeds of this program were sown for the first time by our Reverend Manager, very Reverend Dr. Agustin Palakaparambil. And in fact, he's a man of elite vision, great exposure to the wide world, and a man of wisdom. And we can always capitalize on his noble vision and his great support. With a deep sense of gratitude, I extend a very warm welcome to you, Father. And our principal, Dr. Rajiv Agis Mekaran, sir, I would say he's the go-to man for us, in the sense that whenever we meet some kind of hurdle, and whenever we have to encounter some kind of hurdles, he's always there with the solution. And he always helps us in executing all these programs, most of which are planned by he himself. And most cordial welcome to you, sir. And joining us today, we have our beloved bursar, Reverend Father George Pulgalai, who is the man behind all the physical growth of this college. A warm welcome to you, Father, as well. And in fact, it's really a great pleasure to welcome our resource person for the day, Mr. Vincent Marin, sir. In fact, when I went through his incredible profile, I was amazed by the kind of the vast nature of his accomplishments. And later, as we had a couple of correspondences, I happened to learn that the certain strongholds of his personality were his humane nature. He's a very down-to-earth person, and he's surprisingly a humble person. And I was very much impressed by his personality. Of course, we are very happy to have you here, sir. I know that it's bedtime for you, but still you have managed to keep awake and join us today. And a most cordial welcome to you, sir.
Thank you.
And my dear colleagues are here, my students. About 100 of them have joined the Google Meet platform. The rest of them are watching it live through the YouTube live streaming. Warm welcome to one and all. Now, let me invite our beloved manager, Dr. Agustin Palakaparambil, to inaugurate this session. Over to you, Father.
Hi, dear Vincent.
Very glad to see you here.
Thank
How
you.
hope you are doing good.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Give my very warm regards to your family members, also to all
Yes,
Chicago. I think you all are safe there.
We are.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for joining us. I know it is almost 10 p.m. there, so you have to go next morning for work. A very busy person. Yet, because you are so generous, humane, and well-disciplined, that is why you agreed to come over to us through this web medium. Thank you for your wonderful magnanimity. It's my great joy to introduce you to our campus community. He's a multifaceted personality. He's a deep believer in God. Has a great sense of social awareness. Helps a lot of youngsters there in Chicago who are in search of some job, some opportunity to be placed in life. You can always count on Vincent, his support. Now he's a multimillionaire, but a very simple person. Thank you for joining us. In the name of the campus community, I most cordially welcome you to this program. Also, it is my great joy to inaugurate this wonderful program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father. And I would like to ask our principal, Dr. Rajiv Mekaran, to have a word with us.
Esteemed Manager, Reverend Dr. Augustine Balikaparambil, Honorable Resource Person Vincent A. Marine, respected Father George Bullialai, respected IQC Coordinator Jilu Annie John, Dr. Sumesh George, Mithun John, respected faculty members, administrative staff, and dear students. It is really heartening that the IQAC has taken the initiative to organize an international webinar on job skills for the digital workspace by Mr. Vincent A. Marine from USA. I appreciate the earnest efforts of the IQAC and wish all success for this academic endeavor. Our chief guest of the day, Mr. Vincent A. Marine, is the close friend of our beloved manager. He is a renowned scholar and very active in the field of digital world. I am very happy to welcome you, sir, to this function. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I would like to call upon our bazaar and course coordinator, Reverend Father George Pulligalai, to felicitate the occasion.
Respected Manager, Very Reverend Dr. Augustine Palikaparambil, respected Principal Dr. Rajiv Mekaran, our Chief Guest and Resource Person, Mr. Vincent A. Marine, respected teachers, dear friends, students alone. This webinar is a matter of great significance of two reasons. One, it's about job skills. As we know, thousands of youngsters are unemployed in India. In Kerala, thousands of youngsters who are highly educated remain unemployed. I think this webinar is extremely appropriate and advantageous to our students to get a job in this new scenario, especially in this COVID-19 scenario. A second reason is we are proud to have Mr. Vincent A. Marine with us as the resource person. He's an international figure and the most apt person to talk to us on this topic. And we are really proud and happy to have Mr. Vincent A. Marine in the campus through this Google Meet. And I wish all the very success and best wishes to all who are participating in this program. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father. We are moving on to the much awaited part of the program. And in fact, I am very happy to present before you the profile of our resource person, Mr. Vincent A. Marine. He's the global CEO at Sidley Austin, which is a 2.5 billion revenue law firm. And he has a very distinguished professional service background, including 3 years as the CIO of Huron, a public company, and 16 years at McKinsey and Company in 5 different roles with increased responsibilities. And the last as CEO for the Americas region and led teams on 5 continents, each responsible for firm-wide services. And he's a much sought after people leader and a developer. Mr. Vincent was the recipient of McKinsey's prestigious Marvin Brower Values Award, which recognizes distinctive client service, fostering an inclusive, non-hierarchical work environment, and striving to improve the overall quality of the firm. And he has won so many awards. He's a Chicago CEO of the Year, a Business Leader of Color and Award recipient, and an invited member of the Wall Street Journal CEO Network. And he also serves as the chair of the Theos groups of global 100 largest law firms. Again, board director and awards committee chair. Again, advisory board member for Microsoft, BlackBerry, and others, and a board director for several other non-profits. Warm welcome to you, sir. And we are waiting to listen to you. And over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and a very good morning to all of you. Let me begin with an expression of my profound gratitude to very dear Father Augustine, Father George, and Dr. Reggie for this invitation. You have all invited me to speak about skills for the future, but ironically, I feel like you are all ahead of me because you have already seen February 5th, and I am still stuck in February 4th. And I also would love to express my very sincere appreciation to all the faculty and staff who are joining. The work that you do is very noble work, whether you are appreciated as much as you should be appreciated all of the time by your students and even by the institution or not. Please know that the work that you do is very noble in developing young minds and developing the leaders for the future. Dr. Jilu Annie John had the challenge of working with me to make this webinar happen. And her professionalism, effective communication, and the way she meticulously attends to the details impressed me very much. And I took that as a small sample of what St. George's College is. And if this is the case, then you are all lucky to be part of this organization and to be learning from people like her. Thank you, Doctor. I am delighted to be with you all even virtually. In fact, I looked it up today. It is exactly 13,996 kilometers between my home and St. George's College in Kerala. And we are able to do this with the help of technology that was not readily available even 5 or 10 years ago. So this is a clear example of innovation and the kind of digital transformation that we will be talking about for the next hour or so. Let me pause here and find out, do we really have an hour or do we have 45 minutes at this point?
So you can continue as far as you want, sir.
Oh, really? So this could go on for many hours then. We have a lot to talk about, but I will pick up the pace soon. But for now, let me begin with slide 2, which has some very familiar content that you all would have heard about time and again from your parents, from your professors, from Achins, as well as anyone that cares about you. Education certainly is critical. This is something that will stay with you for life. And I have throughout my life viewed education and my professors as the ladder that was taking me from where I started to all that I have been able to accomplish. So my ask of you would be to try and do this as well as you can. It is not a huge commitment. You are in college for 3 or 4 years and do the very best work that you can do here. As Achin said, I have strong belief in God, and my faith drives a lot of what I do. So from my own experience, I would also say that for anything to come to fruition in life, there are a minimum of two things that need to come together. One is the human effort, and then the divine will has to will what it is that is to be accomplished. I cannot lock myself in a room and pray, do nothing but pray all day long and ask God to make me a doctor. The human effort has to be there to really meet if God has willed that to happen. So if I were to simplify everything that I have to say to you, it would be three simple things. One is stay close to God, whatever higher power that you believe in. Secondly, always do your best work. That way you will never have any regrets, and you will have the satisfaction of you have done your best. And the third is, particularly at the age group that you are in, listen to your parents, listen to your professors, listen to your elders. That goes a long way to accomplishing anything that you're trying to accomplish in your life. The third item is something that I want to spend a little bit of time on. Be mindful and manage your digital twin. Whether we like it or not, these days, every single day, we are helping to create something that has come to be known as a digital twin. Every site that you visit on the internet, every message that you send by WhatsApp or text message, every video that you monitor, you watch, and every purchase that you make, all of these kinds of things gets recorded. And particularly in the business that my firm is in, there are tools and ways to really recover every single one of them, no matter whether it was yesterday or last month or last year. And these things come back to hurt you. As Achin said, when we hire people, we do background checks. As part of that, there are several things that come into play, including monitoring of what this individual has done on social networks. And today, for example, one of our MPs was kicked out of two of the committees that she was on, Education Committee and Budget Committee, two very prestigious committees. She was kicked out of it because it came to light that she had affiliated herself to certain groups and had tweeted and liked certain messages, which clearly are not in the spirit of what an MP should be doing. So these things do matter. I'm going to move on fairly quickly from here. The next item is pretty obvious, and I will touch on it later. Setting high standards for yourself and holding yourself accountable. That is very critical, because if you cannot hold yourself accountable, you don't have the credibility to hold anyone else accountable. And then there were two other items on that slide. Particularly the last one is one of my favorite ones, which is to develop a grateful and a giving heart, and to be humble. We will touch on that again later. Now that we are on slide 3, you see two quotations here from ancient times. One is from the 6th century by a Greek philosopher who talked about the constancy of change, the fact that change is here to stay. And then again in the 1800s, Charles Darwin, who I believe was an English naturalist, talked about it in even more refined or more defined terms, that the people who will survive changes that happen in the world, in life, are not necessarily the most intelligent people or the strongest people, but the ones who can adapt to changes. And in the first few slides, what I'm trying to do is set the context for the world that we are living in and why the topic that we are about to talk is important. So this slide basically says that change is here to stay, and we need to become comfortable with adapting to it. The next slide gets into the fact that we are all used to disruption, which is very common these days. However, we are not used to the kind of rapid and speed of disruption. To give you a few examples of the first statement, we all were used to the small evolution, for example, of videotapes to DVDs to streaming. That whole process has taken us, I don't know, 10 plus years. And we were even used to moving away from using films to capture pictures to digital cameras. That process took several years. However, when you move to the second statement, the rapidity of the changes, look at a smartphone, for example, these days. Very quickly, you can identify 8 to 10 different products or industries that a smartphone has displaced. A simple example, it is a camera, it is a video recorder, it is an audio recorder, it is an alarm clock, it is a torchlight, it is a computer, you can do calculation on it, it is a scanner, you can take a picture and digitize a document. And it is also a music player. So on and on it goes, and it all happens so rapidly that life has to adjust and catch up to it. On the next slide, I talk a little bit about, or actually it is Mary Barra who talks about it. She is the head of General Motors, the great car company that once used to be the largest company in the world and so on, and manufactured cars like Cadillacs and Chevrolet and all that. And she has a famous quote here that says, the kinds of changes that we are going to see in the next 5 to 10 years are going to be even more than what we have seen in the past 50 years. She herself came out 2 weeks ago and announced that General Motors will stop making cars that run on petrol and diesel in about 14 years, 2035, by which time every car that they manufacture will be an electric car. I will be bold enough to say today that it is not going to take that long. They will have to adjust that timeline and get to that even sooner than that because of the introduction of electric cars and all that has already happened. This year, Tesla alone produced 500 electric cars. And next year, their goal is to go over 1 million cars. So change is happening at a very rapid pace. And Corona is at this point accelerating change. For example, we had planned all kinds of transformation for the next 5 years, and we are ending up doing a lot of that within a year. That is the speed at which the things are beginning to happen. The next slide gets into the fact that a lot of the change that Mary was talking about is driven by digital disruption. And an example of that clearly is what we are going through with coronavirus, basically forcing everyone to work from home and all the other things that needed to come together to enable that, whether it is a video platform or digitized data that is being used regularly without people relying on paper. And the one unfortunate side of that is any business that is not able to adapt and overcome this drive to digital world is going out of business. One sad reality in the US is every single day, about 1,000 businesses are going out of business permanently. So far, the numbers show that we have lost about 3.5 lakhs businesses closing their doors permanently and moving on. In the next slide, I have an illustration of just the endless list of digital products that come to market. I'm not expecting us to go through each one of them or even try to understand what they do. Please take my word that these are all real products. They are introduced into the market, and there is a customer group that benefits from each of these, and we ourselves use several of these at this point. On the next slide, and before I keep moving too fast, I want to, I guess, clarify that I'm trying to make about 10 different points in the course of the presentation. The first one was that change is a constant. That is something that we all need to recognize. The second one was what Mary Barra said, which is in the next 5 to 10 years, we will see a lot more changes than what we even saw in the past 50 years. The third item is recognizing that all these changes are largely driven by the digital transformation that we're going through. On this slide, I want to draw attention to the fourth item I want us to take away, which is when we think about going to work for a company, there are 3 things in a very simplistic way that come into play. One is the role, which the employer gets to decide what group of activities makes what particular role. So if I'm entering an organization as an analyst, it may be to process certain kinds of data, to produce certain types of reports, et cetera, and all those things are grouped together as a role. And then on the right-hand side, you see skills, which are largely what you learn in college or through a trade school in terms of the foundational things about, if you're an accounting major, what is debit, what is credit, how do you balance a balance sheet, what is a profit and loss statement, all those kinds of things are the skills that you learn. If you're a chemist or a physicist, you get to understand the periodic tables and so on. So those are largely acquired through formal education. What you see in the middle is the more challenging and oftentimes what gets either people into trouble or what makes it difficult for an employer to find the right kind of people. These are the characteristics that can be observed about an individual that really predict and enable a person from being either an ordinary performer or a superior performer. And on the next few slides, we will talk a little bit more about it. But this is a key foundational thing that you all should be paying attention to at this point. This slide is a transition slide, which basically says trying to predict the future is like looking at a crystal ball at some points. But at least for the near term, we can certainly talk about things that are coming into play and are important to the workplace or the workspace. I use the two terms somewhat interchangeably. If you are going into an office and if the office is increasingly becoming digitally enabled, it is a digital workplace. But in this context, when we are all working remotely, the workspace is wherever we happen to be working from. So the two are somewhat very interrelated and somewhat even interchangeable. On the next slide, I want to make one more point. This is my point number 5. In the days of old, if I look at my parents, they started doing one job and they were able to retire in the same job. They both happened to be teachers. And even in my generation, largely you can stay in the same field. However, the world that you will be entering into is rapidly changing. And what you really need to understand and do is build the capability to adapt to many futures. The job that you enter into may not exactly be the same or even in the same area 5 years later or 10 years later. So this is a key point to understand. And if you're willing to bet on the future, then you can believe I'm going to be an accountant and I will be an accountant for life. Unfortunately, that is very unlikely to play out for the next 20, 30, 40 years that you may be working. On the next slide, we get into the key component of what I'm trying to cover in this presentation. So I will spend quite some time on this slide. These are several of the key capabilities, key skills, however you want to call it, that clearly will define your success in the workplace. These days, every employer is looking for employees who can be flexible, not get into a mindset of this is what my job is, this is all I will do, but really be willing to go the extra mile, take on newer things, and be adaptable as the business evolves. Business acumen says basically that you have a full understanding of what the business of the employer is, and that you are always of the mind that you're trying to achieve the overall objectives of that business. Collaboration is very key. There are not too many jobs these days where an individual can operate on his own or herself. So being able to work with teams is very, very critical in the workplace at this point. And oftentimes these are teams, which we will talk on in a few minutes, that could be dispersed. They could be all over the world. And there are all kinds of other things that come into play as well. Confidence, sometimes we have the tendency to hide behind oh, I am an introvert, and so I tend to behave in a certain way. And I think there was another famous psychiatrist who said there is really no such thing as pure introvert or a pure extrovert. All of us have a mix of both. Believe it or not, all my personality tests come out saying that I'm an introvert. But at the same time, when the occasion makes it necessary, I can certainly be an extrovert. I can walk into a room of complete strangers and still make conversation and be very comfortable with it, or give a presentation to thousands of people staring at them in the face on a big stage. So it is possible for every one of us. The one thing that I would suggest, and I have practiced regularly to good success, is when you feel that you are not confident enough, over preparation certainly helps. So prepare and be comfortable with the topic, with the environment that you're going to be moving into, and that always helps. Design thinking basically says that you are willing to put yourself in the shoes of the customer. Listen to them, think like them, and design whatever it is that you are producing to meet the specifications and the needs of the customer. Digital dexterity gets into your ability to use and manipulate technology and the tools that are going to be available. Diversity is becoming one of the hottest topics, particularly in the US and even in the world. The inclusion of people of different backgrounds and different mindsets, and making sure that all of those voices can be heard, and really realizing that there is value in multiple perspectives and not be surrounded by just yes people. And this can get very tricky. I will talk about it in a few minutes as well. The growth mindset is, again, I will touch on it again in the next slides. Simply says that you are constantly willing and anxious to learn and grow. Innovation, I think the word speaks for itself. Outcome driven. Gone are the days when someone would go to the office and spend 7-8 hours and come out. 1 or 2 hours of that might have been with lunch and coffee and chaya and all that. These days, people are measured constantly, not on the amount of time they spent or even the effort that they put forth. Oftentimes, the measurement is the results one produces. So being an outcome-driven individual is very critical. Every office has its own politics, trying to understand and not get too caught up in it. At the same time, being respectful of that is a necessary evil, so to say. And then risk-taking is not talking about the kind of risk that people take when they do rash driving and so on, but more of calculated risks. If you always play it safe, that is going to limit the direction that you could move in, the pace at which you could move in, and possibly even the results that you can produce. So there is always a certain amount of educated risk-taking that needs to come into play. So once again, I would say this is probably the more, if not the most important slide that clearly spells out the skills and the competencies that you need in the digital workspace. The next slide gets into a bit more of a description of some of the key items on the previous slide. I touched on each of them, so I am not going to spend a lot of time here. So let's move on to a recent survey that was done on the next slide, which tried, I think the question was asked of about 35, 40 HR leaders, the next slide from here, of actually 80 HR executives, asking them to identify the skills needed to work remotely. Here again, you will see that a lot of what is being identified as the more important skills are not necessarily the person should know the chemical formulas or should be able to balance the account books and things like that, but the more competency type of skills that I was talking about from the previous slide. Being able to communicate well, the discipline, You can say on the one that, time management, flexibility, each of these things are very critical for an employer to believe that an employee can work remotely, out of sight from manager, director, and still be an outcome-oriented individual if the person is good at these kinds of things. And there is a lot of debate going on in the offices. Do we bring people back right now, or do we force them to come soon after they get the vaccine? All those kinds of things. And then there is also the mindset that says, as long as people are working effectively remotely, we may have a solution in trying to leverage all kinds of other things, including resources like that maybe in India. So all kinds of interesting discussions are going on at this point. The seventh point is on the next slide, which again is another important slide. I know I am talking to people living in God's own country, congratulations, as well as the state that happens to be, at least based on my knowledge, the most literate state in India, which again is a huge accomplishment for all of you who are in Kerala. And what this quotation is saying is, all that is wonderful, that was the definition of literacy up until now, which is a person's ability to read and write, which is a measure of a definition of literacy. However, to thrive in the future that we are faced with, there is going to be a lot of learning, unlearning, and then relearning, which often involves something new. And this can be hard. I'll give you a simple example. I'm a pretty good tennis player, but I'm also one of those people that constantly tries to go to the next levels. So I am working with a coach who's trying to help me to hit the ball in such a way that the ball spins even more as it goes to the other side and makes it difficult for the other person to hit it back. To do that, I have to unlearn some of the ways in which I have been doing playing tennis for years. And it is hard to, and I can use the same analogy. For example, I've been learning Malayalam for quite some time. To try to get to the next levels, at some points it becomes challenging because I need to silence the Tamil pronunciation of certain words in order to pick up the more accurate Malayalam pronunciation. And Malayalam has a lot more sounds than Tamil does. So those things are hard. However, that is the reality that we are going to be living in. And we all need to get comfortable with the idea of continuous growth, which involves learning, unlearning, and then learning new things as you go along. The next slide introduces another important aspect of this, which gets into the topic of artificial intelligence. When the question was asked of whatever number you see on the slide, of people, whether they were using artificial intelligence in their lives, many of them said no. I'm on slide 15, if we could go there. So about 60% said, or many of the people said they are not using it. But of the people who said they are not using it, there were 60% who were using it for driving purposes, for Google Maps and so on. 45% that were using predictive language. When you type a text message, it prompts you the right spelling of a word or the possible word that you may be looking for. Those are all artificial intelligence based. People use it as a virtual assistant. At home, we received a gift from a guest who stayed with us. It's an Amazon product called Alexa. And all we have to say is, Alexa, what is the weather? And our voice comes back and tells us what the weather for the day is. And there are many more applications of that. Alexa can turn off the light, turn on the light based on the time that you come and go. It can even order supplies. Alexa, order paper towel, and the system knows exactly where to order it from and how much to order at the time. So these kinds of things are becoming common experiences these days. all enabled by artificial intelligence. And next, and we begin to see this in many ways. The cars have them, and the resumes that, the CVs that you may send to an organization these days may not be looked at by a human person at all. The CV gets fed into a system that is entirely artificial intelligence based, which is either going to reject a CV or proceed, pass along the CV for further review and interviews and so on and so forth. And organizations are adopting things like that, not only for the labor benefits, but also to eliminate certain biases that humans introduce when they are trying to hire people. So this is becoming a very common practice at this point. I'm going to pick up the speed a little bit, realizing that time is fleeting away. So the next slide has a very radical example of how artificial intelligence has been applied in a hotel in Japan, where they have basically replaced receptionists with robots that are able to do the work of receptionists. On the next slide, as I said, I will come back to the topic of diversity. On the next slide, 17, we see the different generations that work in the workplace at the same time. In the US and even across the world, people categorize people who are born within about a 20-year period as a generation unto its own. So on slide 17, there is a listing of different generations, and I think most of you belong to the Generation Z or iGen, assuming that you are in the ages 9 to 25 group of students, and then the faculty will be to the left of that. Each of these are defined by various life experiences that each generation was born into and experienced through the course of the early years. The next one gets into, next slide, gets into the acceptance of artificial intelligence by these different groups of people. And the point that this slide is trying to make is that the younger generation is much more accepting of the fact that there could be an artificial intelligence colleague sitting next to them in their office as a co-worker doing work that humans were doing 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I think the very first block is trying to show that even 14% of the Generation Z, the group that we are talking about, were perfectly comfortable with an AI-based manager. In the example of the hotel that we talked about, one of those robots can easily contact one of the maintenance workers and ask them to come take care of a problem, or ask a housekeeper to make sure a certain room is cleaned and ready. So in that capacity, the robot or the AI engine could be acting as a manager. Moving along to the next slide, hearing all of this, some of you may feel leaving the college and going into the real world may feel like a high wire act. This may even want some of you to wish that you were in college forever. However, on the next slide, the point I'm trying to make is not every job is going to require experience. And the example I use is when people went to the moon, they were not looking for people with moonwalking experience. If that was a requirement, we would have never gone to the moon. On the next slide, there is again another some important concepts here. On the left-hand side, you see how we operated up until now, that most of the education was believed to have gained or gotten only from the colleges through formal education. And once you got it, you were set for life to basically work and collect money. But on the right-hand side, you're beginning to see that education now is going to be a lifelong venture, particularly because of how fast the world is changing. There is reskilling that's going to be required, and even new career paths that may come into play. And in the past, training sometimes was felt like, oh, we are sending people away from work. But these days, training happens almost every single day. We call it micro-learning in small small quantities. And then sometimes they used to talk about, oh, I don't want to develop this person so well that the person may leave. But now we talk about, whoops, if we don't develop certain people, what happens if they stay? They are going to be unproductive or underproductive, and that is not good for the company. So the company is constantly interested in training people and getting us to the right levels. Moving along again on the next slide, I'm trying to reassure you a little bit that clearly there are a lot of jobs available, and particularly if you focus on the difficult to recruit jobs, these are the jobs that are of the high caliber today and will continue to be. For example, information security, data analytics type of work, artificial intelligence, and advanced machine learning and programming. And these jobs, there's a longer list of these in every field. I'm just using the technology sector as an example here. These kinds of jobs oftentimes command a premium for salary. And then on the right-hand side, you see more examples of difficult to recruit jobs. And we measure the length of time it takes to fill these jobs. And the longer it takes, obviously, it's categorized as a difficult to recruit job. So if you're looking for things that are up and coming and where there is greater demand in the technology field, this is an example. It is not my intention to have any of you rethink the subjects that you're signed up for or the degree that you're working towards. In fact, I would make the opposite point, which is oftentimes when we hire people, we are not always looking at what you have studied, and sometimes even necessarily the grades that you received. It is the raw intelligence, the ability that a person has to process information, how energetic a person is. We talked about several of the characteristics. One of my most popular examples is about 15, 20 years ago, we hired a person who had a PhD in Russian history. And within a month, that person was consulting to one of the largest insurance companies in the US. So it is very possible to take people who have the right skills and get them to do certain things. On this slide, again, it emphasizes the fact that a smart person will always get up to speed fast and may even outpace an experienced person every time given the right opportunity and the right coaching. And the second item I have highlighted here talks about the soft skills are much harder to teach and much harder to recruit people with, and the hard skills can be learned. It's easier to teach somebody to program in a certain language than to teach them to be very focused, very driven, very organized, and all of the other softer skills that we talked about. I've got, I think, three or four more slides. So let's keep moving. The next one simply highlights the fact, I think I touched on this already, in the older days, recruiting happened with a paper resume and personal networks and so on. These days, in the digital transformed world, a lot of it happens with AI-enabled data sources. On the next slide, again, I am trying to highlight the fact that you may see headlines like there's 34 lakhs of jobs that are available and that can fill 50 football fields. But what you really need to understand is the next slide. Where are these jobs, and what is really being recruited for? So on slide 26, that gets into it. 27, I'm trying to speed up a little bit so we have some time for question and answers as well. So in this case, for example, it highlights the fact that women are shying away from cybersecurity. So if you are a young lady who really wants to get into this field, this is going to be one of the ones that they would love to welcome more women. And so understanding the details about availability is critical. And then I think on the next two slides, I was again trying to highlight the fact that as scary as it may seem to get into the job market, there are well-defined, the employer says what they are about, what they will provide, and they spell out what they expect from the candidates. passion, learning and adaptability, etc. So pay attention to those kinds of things. And then the next slide, 28, was again one more example about, in this case, I'm using cybersecurity as an example to highlight where the hiring is happening and where the talent is. On the left side, it says where the talents are. On the right side, it shows what industries are in need of those kinds of talent. And then the next slide was a little bit of a reassuring slide to show you that it doesn't have to be a high wire act. You can be sure-footed as long as you are confident you have learned what needs to be learned. And the final slide, or two more slides, the next one gets into the big picture, the detailed topic that I was talking about. This pyramid comes from another famous psychologist known as Maslow. This is called the Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs. It clearly starts with shelter and food and physiological needs are the basic needs. From there on, safety becomes important. And then before you know it, we look for higher level needs such as esteem and a sense of belonging. And eventually self-actualization, whether we are really being the people that we want to be in life. If you're a Catholic, our faith teaches us that the goal in life is to live a good life and do good things and do all of that in such a way that we make it to heaven. So on the right-hand side, you see that you need to keep your eyes on the bigger picture, even as we work on the basic necessities from time to time. And the last slide simply highlights my wish and advice for you. I was born in Pondicherry and went to a Catholic college like you all do in Chennai, Loyola. And what you saw in the very first slide clearly has worked for me, meaning from where I started to all the kinds of things that I've gotten to do in my career. And I can talk about it for hours. And the fact that I'm able to do well, that formula works. So believe in yourself and bring out the best in you every time so that you realize your full potential and so on and so forth, as you see here. With that, I will stop. I think that was about 35, 40 minutes. And if there are questions, happy to take them.
Thank you, Vincent, sir. Now, we are at the last part of this webinar. For the last 1 hour, we have been listening Vincent sir on the topic job skills for digital workspace. He has beautifully explained the planning for success in digital workspace, competencies for digital workspace, and skills needed for this particular area. I think Vincent sir will spare a few minutes for interaction with our students. So students can, yeah, thank you, sir. Students can post your questions in the chat box. Sir, shall I read questions raised by the students?
Sure, sure.
Okay. The first question from St. Joseph. What are the immediate steps that we have followed to equip the youth to follow digital adaptability?
Clearly, as I said, understanding the changes in the world. And if the question is coming from someone that is studying technology-related subject, then you should pay attention to where the opportunities are. And within your own curriculum, in addition to the hardcore subjects that is being taught, sufficient focus on the kinds of competencies that I was touching on can absolutely help one as they enter the job market.
Yeah, another question from Indira Ranjini. How will artificial intelligence impact on healthcare profession?
Healthcare is one of the areas where AI is already playing a significant role. I have spent quite some time with IBM's Watson artificial intelligence platform. And there they demonstrate multiple ways in which a diagnosis can be impacted by AI, for example. Rather than any of us going to a single doctor and trying to get their opinion, and then from there on moving to a specialist and so on, an AI engine has the ability to bring that kind of a power and expertise into diagnosis in the early stages. So the fact that someone's illness can be diagnosed very early, as well as the treatment, with the benefit of the best minds available in the world coming into the picture of whatever that particular patient needs, it has the potential to clearly improve and enhance the quality of healthcare delivery at this point. Even the vaccines that we are beginning to see coming out, historically, it's taken the world 3 to 4 years to come up with a vaccine for any kind of a pandemic. And we currently have successfully delivered as a human race within 8-9 months vaccines that are working at 95-96% effectiveness. And there was a lot of artificial intelligence kind of activity behind the vaccine being developed. So there is a lot of potential, and healthcare is one of the areas that is very actively embracing AI at this point.
Okay, sir. Another question: can we expect drastic change in Indian workspace through digitalization? And if so, do you think Indian workspace is equipped to meet demand of the industry?
It is, in my humble opinion, not anymore a choice, but it is becoming a necessity if any economy, any country wants to be competitive and keep up with where the rest of the world is going. India has a reputation of providing a lot of technology people to the world through companies like Infosys and Cognizant and Tata Consulting and so on. And both those individuals that they provide for the other worlds like the US need to be up and able to deliver what is going on in the Western world, as well as adapt locally within India to be able to support more of those kinds of activities that are, again, happening inside of India for the benefit of the multinational companies. So absolutely, I think India is very capable. We have the knowledge, we have the people resources, and we are going to be seeing a shift moving away from the old ways of working to leveraging technology and really benefiting from it.
Okay, sir. Another question: do you think COVID pandemic badly affected the IT innovations in US?
I'm sorry, IT what?
IT innovations in US.
It affected in a very positive way because, as I said earlier, a lot of the transformation that was planned for the next 3, 4, 5 years has been accelerated to a point where it's beginning to happen in 6 months or in a year out of necessity. I think earlier I mentioned that the companies that were digitally equipped or were able to transform, Amazon is an example of a company that was already operating digitally quite a bit. But there are a large number of examples where companies were able to quickly become digitally enabled and they are able to survive. And it is the companies that have not been able to do that that are beginning to close their doors and go out of business. So there is a lot happening, and even innovation for the future. There is all kinds of startups that are getting into this space. I was talking to another leader the other day. Historically, people in the US have not been very open to cashless society. Whereas in Japan, for example, for the last 5 years, people take their phone and they can buy something from a vending machine with just the phone acting as a payment system. In the US, we haven't gotten there yet, but we are beginning to see those kinds of innovations coming into play even right now.
Another question, do you think Neuralink, the much discussed innovation by Elon Musk, will play a role in transforming digital workspace?
I will never bet against Elon Musk, given what he has accomplished, whether it is the electric cars and even more impressively his space program. There was a time when we as humans were not able to launch a satellite and bring the launch vehicle back to its launch pad. It would fall in the sea and it has to be recovered and so on. And the kinds of things that Elon Musk has done is absolutely impressive. And if I'm remembering my news correctly, by the end of this year, they're going to send ordinary humans, and people have already signed up, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to go into space and orbit around the space and the Earth for 2 or 3 days as tourists and come back. And I'm pretty confident it's going to happen before the end of the year. So Elon Musk clearly has proven himself as a visionary who can also make things happen that others have found it to be challenging.
Okay, sir. Another question from Vishnuman. Sir, how can we take the advantages of global opportunities in digital workplace? And he also mentioned what is the meaning of this hybrid workspace or hybrid workforce?
Let me start from the second question. The hybrid workforce, or we call it distributed workforce. Like in my own company, for example, I went to the office today. We had a lot of snow here today, but in spite of that, I had to go to the office. I wanted to go to the office. There's about 10-15% of the people that are coming into the office. The rest of the people are working from home. And that is a hybrid model where we are able to get work done with people in office, at home. And you can also expand that to say some people in the US, a lot of people outside of the US, where people are in India and other countries that are actively contributing to the business outcomes. So that is very, very real. And I also clearly see the opportunities. In fact, within my own company, we're talking about if all of this can be done from home within the US, why can we not do some of this work from India, from Philippines, from other parts of the world? Not only for lower cost, but more effectively for the fact that we get the benefit of the time zone as well. I was at one of my previous places, McKinsey, very instrumental in setting up a large shared service center in Trivandrum in Technopark, as well as in Chennai at another location there in Delhi and so on. So these things are coming back into fashion at this point, given what we've seen with COVID. Sorry, I cannot hear you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Last 1 hour you have been listening, Vincent sir. The talk was very thought-provoking. Now I would like to invite Professor St.George for rendering the formal vote of thanks. St. sir, please.
Okay. At the end of this illuminating session, I am to restore thanks on behalf of St. George's College. We are really lucky to have such an eminent teacher Marin with us, and we are really impressed by the eloquence with which he spoke about his faith, the dedications to war, the role of digitalization, the change, and the means of adaptation. We were very keenly listening to your talk, and we had very fruitful interaction to acquire realistic knowledge about, and we are really enlightened by your presence. So much for sparing your precious time and our campus community the illuminating works. Sir, on behalf of St. George's College, we extend our thanks to you. And I would like to express our sincere thanks and gratitude to our beloved manager, Dr. Agustin Palakaparamil, our respected principal, Dr. Reggie Murgi, our sir and course coordinator, George Bullikalai, for their continuous support and encouragement. And I also thank our accuracy coordinator, Professor Dr. Giluani John, Dr. Sumesh George, and all the teachers, students, and all the participants for the active participation and success of this program. Thank you all. Thank you. And the program is over now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you very much.